Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me correctly. So basically, this is going to be, let's study the, this is going to be my first non-technical presentation. So I'll try to do my best to actually present to you the correct information and something interesting. So the name of the talk is a little bit weird. What does sleepy dev mean? And are we going to talk about how sleep is an important thing in development? Kind of and kind of not. So basically, the term dev is sleepy or sleepy dev is one of my favorite memes in the Ethereum ecosystem. It started a few years ago when one of the team members from one project, I won't name them, it was a legit project, but one of the team members got scammed and hacked. And the kind of excuse of the team was that the dev was sleepy. So that's kind of my favorite excuse every time something's not really working or I make a mistake, dev was sleepy, right? Okay. So basically, I wanted to share a little bit of my experience as someone who started in 2017. How the ecosystem looked back then, and how kind of we managed to evolve to what's right now in the DeFi ecosystem. So when I first started developing on Ethereum, obviously there weren't much going on. You as a regular user couldn't really use Ethereum for day-to-day financial stuff. You have to go to ETSEX to trade and stuff like that. Mainly there were ICOs, NFT and CryptoKitty starting to pop off, but as a developer, as someone who wanted to use daily Ethereum, there weren't really much opportunity for me to do that. Now, I'm going to share here, basically, this is one of my favorite chats, because it actually is how the term DeFi originated. So in the spirit of DeFi, the name DeFi actually comes from a Telegram group chat, where a few early members who were starting to develop financial applications on Ethereum wanted to kind of name the movement of financial Ethereum applications. There were a few different names proposed, but DeFi was kind of chosen, and the community accepted it, and our application is now named DeFi Saver, so like hopefully it will not change in the future. Okay, so when we look at the start of DeFi, and once a couple of different applications were starting to pop off, one of the major ones was MakerDAO, as that was the first decentralized stablecoin project on Ethereum. And obviously for trading and for people to maintain stability and to maintain the value and still keep their funds, having a decentralized stablecoin was one of the first and one of the most powerful primitives for everything else. Obviously, lending protocols like Compound were the first ones to actually combine pooled lending, which was much more easier and much more Ethereum friendly. Before that, there was ETHLend, which is a precursor to Aave, but they did peer-to-peer lending, and because of that, it didn't really catch on. One also application I wanted to mention, Pull Together, was also one of the first apps that actually built on top of one of those protocol primitives, and it's something that didn't just recreate traditional finance, but kind of was a nice little showcase to actually see that we can do even better than that. The ecosystem back there was simple. There were DAI as a decentralized stablecoin. There was a few lending protocols. There was a few exchanges that were decentralized that were starting to gain some sort of liquidity. But things were very simple. Well, like interoperability and building on top of each other wasn't really a concept yet. And so while there were a few projects, it was still kind of in an early stage. Like I explained, basically on this slide, DAI as a stablecoin actually worked quite well. There were periods where it went off peg a little bit, but the system actually worked correctly, and that was, I guess, a surprise to most, as it was one of those things that people were always predicting that it will fail. Obviously, as a few protocols like Compound and Maker were starting to gain traction, as a few dashboards are starting to pop off and actually enable users to have better UI and so on, the total value locked in DeFi was starting to rise. At first, it was basically laughable in comparison to traditional finance, but even then, it was starting to actually seem like a real thing. So now I want to mention like the bad things that started to happening. Every time you actually start to have users, you start to have problems, right? So one of the reasons I actually chose the BZX or the Fulcrum hack, as it's probably one of the first hacks that happened that involved a flash loan, and it actually involved price manipulation. That's something that further down the line we saw a lot happening in DeFi. What's really interesting about this is actually another important point is that it happened twice, right? So they managed to fix the bug, the exploit when it happened, but then they kind of, too soon, they didn't check other cases, and 2 days later, they got hacked again on a similar exploit. That's kind of one really important lesson is that you have to take your time in response to any sort of exploit or trouble. One also thing that it's important to mention if we actually analyze a little bit about this hack, why it actually happened. One of the reasons is that a user actually could grab a flash loan. That was their new feature that they just released. And the other reason was that they were using a decentralized price oracle, which at that time was kind of their selling point why it's better than Compound, which obviously decentralization is in itself a really good concept. But at that stage, DeFi was really early, and we didn't know a lot about how to properly grab prices, especially from on-chain. So the attacker could kind of use these two features to manipulate the protocol and hack it. If we look at Compound, which didn't have both of these features, it's something that we can kind of conclude that simplicity and not kind of rushing things, so not really hurrying with a feature set in a financial applications is really important from security and longevity-wise. One of the protocols I would like to mention, which in my mind is always a kind of an example of protocol that did it right, is Uniswap. We probably all know and have used Uniswap. They never really had any serious security issues, and obviously they are now one of the most powerful DeFi primitives we have. A couple of core ideas that Uniswap implemented was that idea that in the first version it was the simplest possible code. It was maybe 100 lines of Viper code. The developer who wrote it wasn't really even an experienced developer, but it was one simple idea. It didn't have any extra things in it, right? A couple of other reasons why that turned out to be really powerful. It was really gas efficient and it was permissionless. So at the time as Uniswap blew up, those kind of concepts really made it possible for them to explode as one of the biggest DEXs out there. After that, after they actually had usages and after they kind of verified the idea, obviously they started iterating and made the version 2 and made version 3. Both versions really good versions, but they kind of listened to the users and made kind of a minimal subset of changes iteratively, and that's why I think they're lasting so long and generally don't have a lot of security and bug issues. As we now continue in our journey through like early stages of DeFi, we see now like basically a Cambrian explosion of protocols. We now essentially have recreated a big chunk of a traditional finance. Finally, DEXs are starting to gain real liquidity, and even larger traders can now use DEXs. Maker is just an example, a lot of different protocols, but Maker also did their upgrade where at first there was SAI, single collateral DAI, then they switched over to DAI, multi-collateral DAI. So that was also like one powerful thing that's happening as the stablecoin was starting to be more stable and gain more traction, right? Now, as you might notice in this talk, I always kind of give the positive and good vibes, then I talk about some hacks. Basically, what happened, for instance, in Maker, it was a so-called Black Thursday event. It was one of the largest stress tests that DeFi experienced. Why this is, for me, a pivotal moment, as I actually think like this is something where after that event, people actually started to believe that this system isn't only working when things are going well, this is a resilient system which can kind of operate in different markets. Obviously, there were some issues. For instance, in Black Thursday, MakerDAO had some bad liquidations happening. That basically means that because of the network congestion, because of all the different, we have on the slide here, yeah, okay. If somebody watched Chernobyl, they'll get the reference. But we had network congestion, we had a lot of different problems, and at the end of the day, there weren't enough liquidity and bot auctioneers to actually properly go through the MakerDAO auction, and what happened is a lot of bad debt occurred. Around 5 million DAI of bad debt was occurred at Maker. At this time, that will be a laughable amount, which is kind of easily filled with something, but at that time, that was kind of a pivotal moment whether or not the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem would survive and how it handled. There is a few of kind of interesting stories around it, because at the time, we were one of the main integrators of Maker. So as well, Maker was experiencing a lot of issues. We have our automation system, which obviously we had all the issues with our API failings, all the issues with gas prices we never expect. At that time, I guess gas price, which was like 200 GUI, was unheard of. I actually, in the smart contract, I had like a sanity check where it wouldn't go over 200 GUI, as I thought the user messed something up. As we know now, it can go over 1,000 of GUIs and so on. So why the shout out to some drunk Maker whale? He's actually kind of a legend early on in the Maker community forum. He was a person who did hold a lot of Maker tokens, which you have like a government's power. So with the government's power, he was one of the main voters, and kind of he was controlling in a way with other voters how the system would work. He would also a lot of times send messages drunk. So the drunk Maker whale kind of thing sticking. While the Black Thursday happened, we were kind of trying to recuperate, we were trying kind of to fix all the things that we saw that were broken, but we also saw that the danger is not over yet. That bad liquidations were still happening at Maker, and we wanted to participate in those liquidations in order to actually stop the protocol from losing more money. We didn't really have time to write like a full-on bot for it, so I basically on Etherscan went through all the Maker contracts and figured out how to participate in the liquidation myself, basically by Etherscan. One thing that was kind of a blocker for me there is that I was poor. So that's where the shout out to drunk Maker whale goes, because I've talked to that person a few times in a DM, and I asked him if he could borrow me some money so I participate in the auctions, and he sent me 500,000 DAI on my MetaMask account. So that was kind of a big shocker for me that somebody I talked to a few times on a message board would actually entrust me with $500,000. So obviously I did return the money, and things went well. So shout out to that guy, whoever he is. He really helped us a lot there. In general, that's one thing I realized there. Even though the community is small, it really is a community of individuals who are real believers there and who kind of have really good values behind them. As we now kind of continue to look what happened in DeFi, Obviously, Compound actually released their own tokens, and they did like one revolutionary thing. They didn't do an ICO or some sort of mechanism. They actually distributed tokens to the actual users. So you could actually mine the Compound token, which I thought was the stupidest idea ever. But it wasn't. Obviously, a lot of different protocols kind of continued, and there we have like a period that's commonly named the DeFi Summer, as there were a bunch of different food tokens offering like 20,000 APY, people exiting in a few days. Obviously, it got a bit kind of scammy and very fast, but what kind of stuck was that new projects could release their own tokens to the actual users who are using them, and that way the distribution will be fair, and they will have like an incentivization, they will kind of incentivize the users to use the protocol. Also, one thing that we got during the DeFi Summer or after that is that protocols and apps are starting to get a lot more complicated. That's one of the most powerful features of DeFi is that interoperability. Like we can stack the protocols on top of one another and create some real powerful things, but it's also starting to look like something that the regular user cannot follow, and something that's maybe too complicated. Okay, so now to jump over the whole bull market, where I do think some interesting things happened. But if we look at the ecosystem now, just as a snapshot of a few years and then now, we can see that the protocols here are much more mature. Most commonly used protocols had a few iterations, had a few security scares. They kind of went over the best practices and so on. So we can trust them much more in terms of security side, but also just in terms of UI, it definitely was much, much better. We also moved to proof of stake, right? That was also a really powerful thing, because now we have a way to bring staking Ether tokens, so LSDs, liquid staking derivatives. In DeFi, we have a source of APY, we have a source of staking, which is kind of totally legit because it's generated from Ethereum. And that allows us also to kind of leverage and create powerful things. Also, as I mentioned a few times, like network is congested. And the network is congested at the worst time possible when you need to send a transaction through. So as the whole community kind of started working on scalability solutions, we now have a couple of really good L2s that are going in the right direction of decentralization and being actually useful. Now, I have talked a lot about how different people get hacked. Let's talk about the time I was the sleepy dev. So basically, because you never expect it will happen to you, but then it does. We had a problem where, gratefully, the hack was reported by a white hat hacker, so nobody really lost the money, but obviously it was really stressful. It happened at our time zone. It was night, so I was sleeping, and my colleagues called me. Because I was still very much asleep, I just hung up the phone, and I didn't really remember anybody calling me, really. The good thing is I have good colleagues, so they managed to kind of identify that the problem is real and how we could fix it. So in the morning, once we woke up, we realized that we would need to actually white hack, rescue all the funds. It was a really stressful situation, but we managed to pull it through. One thing that we did is we did learn a lot from that hack. One surprising thing that happened is I actually thought, like, this is probably over for us. Like, why would anybody trust us? This is such a stupid mistake. I can't believe this happened, and so on. So obviously, I was thinking, like, this is the worst thing ever. One thing that we did do is we did not say that Dev was sleepy. We were actually really honest what happened, that we made a mistake, and that we will take like concrete steps in improving our security. And we actually did, right? After that, a lot of architecture change, a lot of tests, a lot of audits, a lot of things needed to be changed so things like this don't happen in the future. That's basically something I was mentioning earlier. So at the end of the day, there isn't any magic bullet in order to write better code in order to kind of survive in DeFi. It's just to kind of do the basic things right? So you don't hurry, you move slow, you iterate, you try and kind of test out the process before you go all out. In general, you do have to be a bit paranoid in order to survive years and years as a DeFi developer, as a developer for finance in general, right? I don't want to be too paranoid, but like the North Koreans really are out to get us. There are a couple of examples where people were specifically targeted, and so you have to always kind of be careful. And if you're sleepy or you're drunk or anything, your concentration is not there, it's better not even to just touch the computer if you're in DeFi. Obviously, burnout, looking at the prices, things are going to fail, things are not going to fail. The dynamic environment is great, but it's also really stressful. So you have to pace yourself, you have to kind of concentrate on the important things and not worry so much about price and everything else. So when we talk about sleep, and I mentioned what is the sleepy dev and so on, this presentation in general was pretty negative because I talked a lot about hacks, mainly because you learn the most from it. So when you have a stressful situation like Black Thursday, or when you have an event where you have an exploit and so on, those are kind of the pivotal moments where you learn. It's kind of that saying is like either you win or you learn, and we've learned a lot. The sleep trade-off I'm mentioning here. So as a developer, there's gonna be some sleepless nights. There's going to be a lot of stress associated with it. But if we look actually what we're building, I've put here a few quotes where people are actually referencing how they do sleep better, which is great because I don't, but they do sleep better. So when we look at it as a global system, what we're building from 3-4 years back to now, we have improved a lot. The original vision of DeFi, which is a open, decentralized system that doesn't discriminate, which is a system that works for everybody equally, which is open source, a system which is much more fair than the regular system. That's something we're building here, and that's why a few sleepless nights is kind of an okay trade-off, at least if you ask me. So that's it for me. If you have any general questions, obviously this wasn't really a technical talk, but if you wanna do throwbacks to good old moments a few years back, I'm all for it. This is like a microphone.
So I know this talk isn't technical, but can you maybe explain a little bit about what the hack was?
Our own hack we had?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it was actually it did involve flash loans, but basically our system is kind of, we don't really pull together people's money. Like, in my mind, it was always that we don't have a large kind of surface of area where somebody could hack us, and that's why we started like writing a lot of contracts, moving really fast, because I always thought, okay, the way the system was organized, people have their own smart wallet, like an account abstraction. Every operation is in the context of the smart wallet. There's, aside from like slippages or locking somebody's money somewhere, there's not a lot of things that can go wrong here. one thing that went wrong was that we had essentially an approval bug, because the user gave approval to a contract. That contract actually did something with flash loans. So it had kind of a function anybody could enter, because the flash loan should enter from that function. So the attacker then kind of tricked the contract to pull money from the users who gave approval to the contract. That's kind of a simplified version. It actually happened to us. It was hard to explain because a lot of people had approvals that they didn't remove. So it took a lot of time for us to actually kind of try and find the users who had approvals to remove it, so they're not accidentally hacked a year later. Later I found out we weren't the only ones. This is kind of a hack I saw, because then I was looking at it. I saw it like 5, 6 times in different protocols. Is that people generally don't think of approvals as like storing value, but basically if some contract has approvals to it, you can count that contract as like holding money. You have to be really careful with it. Yeah.
I thank you for the amazing question. Do we have any more questions in the audience? Yes.
What's the biggest obstacle you encountered during making the DeFi Saver?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest obstacle would definitely be, I think, kind of believing in it during times where things weren't going so well. So obviously, we started off in kind of a bear market. DeFi wasn't really a sure thing. We were running low on funds. VCs weren't so prevalent back then. So I think the biggest obstacle was kind of having that kind of core belief, like, hey, things we're doing here, other people will find out soon. We will kind of, the industry will come alive, and that was kind of our major bet with DeFi Saver. So we are a kind of an advanced dashboard that combine different protocols and so on. So the bet there was there will be a lot of protocols, there will be users and so on. So that was kind of, I guess, the biggest obstacle, was realizing that it will take time and we kind of need to survive until the adoption comes.
Do we have another question? We have time for one more question. I would personally use this opportunity because OGs like Nenad are really hard to find. And yes, definitely, yes.
So going back to the hack, you guys, how did you fix it? Did you actually white hack your own contracts?
Yeah.
And then just put them back? Put the funds back?
Can I swear?
I don't know.
That was really stressful. Yeah, we basically had to, everybody who had approvals and that token, we had to white hack it, because everybody doesn't know, but there are constantly bots monitoring Ethereum mempools. So we had to be really careful how we're going to perform the white hack, so bots don't intercept the transaction and kind of steal the money before we steal it. We did make kind of a really good setup there, where, because I said steal the money, it was because we use a smart contract as wallets. We actually just, for each user, we made a separate wallet where once we white hacked, we kind of put the money there and only they had access to it. So technically, we never actually touched the money ourselves, but we did perform the white hack, so others don't perform the black yet. Yeah.
Yes, please. A quick question.
Is there any future plans for DeFi Saver regarding upgrades that you could share with us?
Okay, if I understood you correctly, is there any future features? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have 40 seconds. We're really excited about the new strategy system. I'm kidding. But yeah, we're really excited about offering more and more automated strategies. That's a system we developed where we first had only 1, 2 hard-coded operations we can do for the user. Now we have a really more generalized system, so we can build any sort of DeFi strategy specifically for a subset of users. So we're really hoping that that's going to be kind of the next wave once more and more users come, they will want, and we'll have a lot more kind of automated features to help users manage.
So unfortunately, we are out of time. Huge thank you for Nenad for being the real OG.